At 2:14 in the morning, Madame Kong set down her chopsticks, looked across the long dinner table at her son's wife, and said, in front of 12 relatives, 3 senior lieutenants, and 2 household staff, "Now that the proper woman has returned, we can finally correct Jae-hyun's mistake." No one flinched. No one looked away. Kang Jae-hyun sat at the head of that table, the most feared man in Seoul's underground world, the ghost king who had broken stronger men than anyone in that room. And he said nothing. He lifted his glass. He drank. He looked at the far wall like Amara Ellis was not sitting 6 feet away from him with a smile frozen on her face and her hands flat and still on her lap, because if she moved them, even slightly, something inside her was going to come apart. 3 years. That was what his silence cost her. 3 years of being his wife. And she had just learned, in front of an audience, what she actually was. If you've ever loved someone who made you feel invisible while standing right next to them, stay with me. This story is going to hurt in the right places. Before we go further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a like if you're already feeling something, and tell me in the comments what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning. The first time Amara Ellis saw Kang Jae-hyun, he was not doing anything impressive. He was standing at the window of a 42nd floor conference room in downtown Seoul, with his back to the room and a phone pressed to his ear, and he was very quietly telling someone on the other end that they had 48 hours to fix the problem, or he would fix it himself. The way he said it, not loud, not theatrical, just flat and certain, made the 2 attorneys seated across from Amara stop mid-sentence and forget what they were talking about. Amara didn't stop. She was there as a third-party legal specialist, brought in by an international firm to review a merger contract that had run into complications. She had 7 pages of notes, a flight back to Lagos at 6 the following morning, and a very specific problem she needed resolved before then. She did not have time to be impressed by how a man stood at a window. "Mr. Kang," she said when he was still on the phone, "I have a few questions about the indemnity clause in Section 14, and I'm working against a deadline." One of the Korean attorneys sucked in a breath. The assistant near the door went still. Jae-hyun turned from the window slowly. He looked at her the way people look at something unexpected. Not angry, not amused, just recalibrating. He said something brief into the phone and ended the call. "Section 14, he said. "The indemnity clause," she repeated. "The language gives your holding company broad protections in the event of contract breach, but it doesn't specify how breach is defined under Korean commercial law versus the applicable international standard. That gap creates risk for both parties." He sat down across from her. They spent the next 2 hours going through it. By the end, he had restructured the clause 3 times, and the attorneys on both sides were exhausted. Amara caught her flight. She did not think about Kang Jae-hyun again for 6 weeks. Then her family's firm collapsed. It didn't happen all at once. It happened the way most collapses do, in stages that each look manageable until suddenly they aren't. Her father's legal practice in Lagos had been operating for 22 years. It had survived a lot. It did not survive a coordinated campaign by a rival firm with powerful political connections and a very specific interest in destroying the Ellis family's client base. By the time Amara understood the full shape of what was happening, 2 senior partners had been scared off, 3 major clients had withdrawn without explanation, and her father was sitting at his kitchen table at 8 in the morning with a glass of water and the look of a man who had already done the math. She was the one who answered the call from a Seoul number she didn't recognize. A man named Park, Jae-hyun's chief of staff, explained the proposal in careful, neutral terms. Mr. Kang required a wife, a specific kind of wife. Educated, professional, internationally credible. Someone who could sit across from foreign business partners and hold her own. His former fiancée had been involved in a scandal that was still causing reputational damage in certain circles. He needed to demonstrate stability. He was prepared to offer financial assistance to a qualifying family, clear specific legal complications that had been created for certain businesses, and provide a generous monthly arrangement for the duration of the agreement. Duration, 2 years, with option to extend. "He's buying a wife," Amara said. "He's proposing a structured arrangement," Park said, careful as always. "And he chose me because—" "You impressed him," Park said. And you are precisely what this situation requires. She said no. She hung up. She sat in her apartment in Lagos and stared at the wall for about 4 minutes, and then she called her father and asked him to tell her honestly how bad it was. He told her. She called Park back. She told herself it was a transaction, a legal instrument, something she would fulfill professionally and exit cleanly. She drew up her own terms before she signed anything. She had her own attorney review the contract, added clauses she insisted on, and made sure she understood exactly what she was walking into. She understood the contract. She didn't understand Jae-hyun. Their first meeting as a formal couple happened in a private dining room at a restaurant that didn't have a sign outside. He was already seated when she arrived. He stood when she walked in, which she hadn't expected. He waited until she sat before he did. Small things. Automatic, maybe. Manners ingrained early. But she noticed them anyway. "I want to be clear about what this is," he said after they ordered. "So do I," she said. "I've read the contract. I have no expectations outside of what's in writing." He nodded. "Good. I also need you to understand that I'm not going to perform warmth I don't feel," she said. "I can be professional, I can be appropriate in public settings, and I can represent this arrangement in a way that serves the purposes you described, but I'm not going to pretend to be in love with you." He looked at her for a moment. "That's fine. And I'll need access to my own schedule. I intend to continue practicing law." "That's also fine. Then I think we understand each other," she said. They ate dinner. He asked her at one point what specific area of law she specialized in. She told him contract law, international commercial disputes, compliance structures. He asked a follow-up question that was sharper than she expected. She answered it. He asked another. By the end of the meal, they had somehow drifted into a genuine conversation about a case she'd handled 2 years earlier in Brussels that had involved a jurisdictional dispute between 3 different legal systems. He was interested. Actually interested, not performing it. She noticed that too. The wedding was small and quiet and nothing like what she had imagined her wedding would be when she was a girl. Her parents flew in. Her mother cried during the ceremony, which made Amar's throat close up in a way she had not prepared for. Her father shook Jae-hyun's hand afterward and said something to him in a low voice that she couldn't hear. Jae-hyun nodded once. She never asked what was said. Living with Kang Jae-hyun was nothing like what she expected. She had expected coldness, a large empty space with a man who moved through it like a function, not a person. What she found was more complicated than that, and in some ways harder to manage. He was not unkind. He was not warm either, not in any consistent way, but he was not the performance of cruelty she had braced herself for. He kept irregular hours. He came home late most nights, sometimes after she was already asleep, sometimes at hours that weren't reasonable by any civilian standard. He didn't explain himself. He didn't announce his schedule. He existed in the penthouse the way a weather system exists, present, significant, and not particularly concerned with whether you'd made plans around it. But he noticed things. She mentioned once that the lighting in the home office she'd set up was giving her headaches. 3 days later, the lighting was different. She never saw anyone come to change it. He didn't say anything about it. She had a habit of making tea at night when she couldn't sleep. She started finding her preferred brand in the kitchen, purchased in quantities she hadn't bought. She hadn't told him what kind she drank. She hadn't asked anyone to get it. He remembered. He arranged for it without making it a conversation. She didn't know what to do with that. What she learned about Kang Jae-hyun over months was that he was not a man who expressed things through words. He expressed things through attention. He was paying attention all the time, to everything, to everyone around him, and occasionally that attention translated into small, quiet actions that he never acknowledged and clearly did not expect to be thanked for. It was just how he operated: surveillance and response, threat assessment and management. Only she wasn't a threat. She was something he was managing differently. She told herself not to read into it. She told herself this repeatedly. She had signed a contract. She was a professional. She understood what this was. But there were dinners where the food got cold because the conversation wouldn't stop, and she would look up and realize 2 hours had passed. There were nights when he came home past midnight and she was still awake reading, and he would sit in the chair across the room, not speaking, not asking anything of her, just sitting there in a way that felt less like indifference and more like not being able to go upstairs yet. like he needed to be somewhere that wasn't the rest of his life for a few minutes. She started leaving the reading light on. She never told him that either. The organization he ran was something she understood only in fragments. She wasn't brought into that world. She didn't ask to be. But she could see its edges, the way certain calls made his face go very still, the way lieutenants moved when he was in a particular kind of mood, the way some nights he came home with a tension in his shoulders that didn't have anything to do with boardrooms or negotiations. She learned to read the difference. She learned not to ask questions that weren't her business. Madame Kong made it clear from the beginning that Amara was not a real member of this family. She did it carefully. She was not a crude woman. She didn't say it in those words. What she did instead was a kind of sustained, quiet excavation, remarks about the family's history that assumed Amara wouldn't be around to see any of it continue, invitations to events that arrived a day late, conversations in Korean that shifted to English the moment Amara walked in the precise way that makes it clear the shift was intentional and not considerate. The thing about Madame Kong was that she wasn't entirely wrong. She had assessed the situation accurately. The contract had an end date. Amara was not the kind of wife she had wanted for her son. Amara was the solution to a problem, and Madame Kong had spent enough decades managing problems to know one when she saw one. What she hadn't factored in was the part where Amara fell in love with her son. That wasn't in the contract. It wasn't in any plan Amara had made. It crept in through the side door, through dinners that lasted too long, and reading lights left on, and the specific way he said her name. Not warmly, not with any particular softness, just with a precision that meant he was actually thinking of her when he said it, not addressing a general direction in the room. By the time she recognized what had happened, it was too late to undo it. She didn't tell him, because she had made a promise not to have expectations, and she understood that expectations were the one thing she could not afford to show Kang Jae-hyun. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She managed it. She carried it quietly. She kept showing up, to the dinners, to the appearances, to the late nights, not because the contract required it, but because she had become someone who couldn't stay away from a man who noticed the kind of tea she drank and never once said a word about it. She thought, if she waited long enough, he would eventually say something. She waited 2 years before she started understanding that some people are capable of noticing every single detail about you and still never actually seeing you. The annual gathering of the Kong organization was held at a private venue outside the city. Not flashy, not loud, the kind of event that looked like a formal business dinner unless you understood what you were looking at. Amara wore black. She stood beside Jae-hyun in the way she had learned to stand beside him in these settings, present, composed, credible. And she watched the room the way she always did, cataloging faces and relationships and the small political currents that moved through powerful groups. She saw Soren Han from across the room. She didn't know who she was yet. She just saw the reaction. Kang Jae-hyun, who controlled a room simply by existing in it, who moved through every social situation with the same measured control he brought to everything, went still. It was less than a second. Most people wouldn't have caught it. Amara caught it, because she had spent 2 years learning to read the specific geography of his stillness. And this one was different. This wasn't threat assessment. This wasn't calculation. This was the involuntary kind of stillness. The kind that happens before the brain catches up, when the body recognizes something the mind hasn't processed yet. She watched him cross the room, watched the conversation begin, watched the way Soren Han looked at him, and the way he looked back, and felt something collapse quietly inside her chest. She had seen him look at a lot of people. She had never seen him look at anyone like that, like he was looking at a version of his life that had gone a different direction. She held her glass with both hands and kept her face exactly right, and did not excuse herself until there was a reasonable moment to do so. In the bathroom, alone, she ran cold water over her wrists, an old trick her mother taught her for when the feeling got too big, and looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. She had known, somewhere below the part of herself she let herself listen to, that this was always how it was going to go. She had just hoped she was wrong. She dried her hands. She fixed her expression. She walked back out into the room and stood beside her husband for the rest of the evening, and she did not look at Soren Han again, and she did not allow herself to feel anything she could not explain away. But something had shifted, and she knew, the way you know certain things before you are ready to know them, that the version of her life that included waiting for Kang Jae-hyun to see her had just run out of time. The drive home from the venue took 40 minutes. Amara spent all 40 of them looking out the passenger window at the city moving past in streaks of light and dark. And Jae-hyun spent them on his phone. Not a call, just reading something, scrolling with his thumb in the particular way that meant he was processing, not actually absorbing information. She knew his phone habits. She knew a lot of things about him that he had never intentionally taught her. Neither of them spoke. This was not unusual. They had driven in silence before. Comfortable silence, sometimes. The kind that settles between two people who have spent enough time together that absence of words doesn't feel like absence of something else. But this silence was different in its texture, and she was aware of it the way you're aware of a sound that isn't there anymore when it should be. The car stopped in front of the building. The driver got out to open her door. She got out. She went upstairs. She washed her face, changed out of the black dress, and sat on the edge of the bed for a while in the dark before she decided that sleeping wasn't going to happen and went to make tea. Chae-hyun came in around 2. She heard his footsteps in the hall. She always heard them. She had memorized the particular rhythm of how he moved through the apartment late at night. And then the sound stopped outside the kitchen doorway. "You're awake," he said. "Tea," she said, as if that explained it. He came in and opened the refrigerator and stood looking into it for a moment the way people do when they're not actually hungry, just need something to do with their hands. He took out a bottle of water, closed the door, leaned against the counter. "The Han merger is going to create complications," he said. "I imagine it will," she said. "Soren Han's legal team is aggressive. They'll push on the asset division structure." She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You should make sure your contracts are clean on the subsidiary arrangements." "They are." "Then you don't have a problem." He looked at her for a moment. She held his gaze and kept her face neutral and waited. He drank from the water bottle and pushed off the counter and said, "Get some sleep," and left the kitchen. She sat there until the tea was cold. She was not angry. She was something more patient than angry, and more dangerous. She was paying attention. The weeks after the gathering unfolded in a specific pattern that she cataloged without meaning to because cataloging things was what she did. She was a lawyer. Evidence was her language. Jae-hyun's schedule shifted. Not dramatically. Nothing so obvious that someone not paying attention would have noticed. But she paid attention. Dinner meetings that ran later, calls that he took in his office with the door closed when he used to take them in whatever room he happened to be in. A Saturday morning in his 3rd week back from a business trip to Busan, where he left the apartment at 8 and came back after 3 and offered no particular account of where he'd been, which was new. He'd never volunteered information about his movements before. That wasn't the shape of their arrangement. But there had always been a kind of ambient transparency, a general accounting of his geography that she'd been able to piece together from context. That transparency had developed a gap. She didn't ask. Their agreement said she had no claim on his time, but a woman who has spent 2 years learning the exact geography of a man's habits knows when the map has changed. His assistant, a quiet, precise man named Choi, who had worked for Jae-hyun for 6 years, began handling scheduling adjustments through intermediaries instead of coordinating directly with her. Small shift. Practical, maybe. She had no official role in his professional operations. But the timing of it. Park, the chief of staff, came to her one afternoon while she was working from home. He sat across from her desk with the careful posture of a man who had rehearsed what he was about to say. "Mrs. Kang," he began. "Amara," she said, not looking up from her laptop. "We've discussed this." "Amara." Brief pause. "I want to make sure you're aware that the terms of your arrangement are being reviewed. Given recent developments in Mr. Kang's business landscape, there may be conversations in the coming months about the structure of—" "Park," she said. He stopped. She closed the laptop. She looked at him directly. "Say what you came to say." He held her gaze for a moment, and she saw something in it that she respected him slightly less for. Not malice, but the practiced neutrality of a man who has made his peace with delivering difficult information as long as it was framed correctly. "The family feels that the original purpose of the arrangement may have expired," she said. "That the circumstances have evolved," he said carefully, "and Madame Kang asked you to have this conversation." He didn't answer, which was its own answer. "Tell Madame Kang," Amara said, keeping her voice completely level, "that I am aware of my contractual position and I don't require reminders. If there are official changes to the terms of our agreement, They need to come through legal channels, not through informal visits. She opened the laptop again. Park sat there for one more moment, then stood, adjusted his jacket, and left. She stared at the document on her screen for a long time without reading any of it. The first time she saw Soren Han after the gathering, it was not engineered, or if it was engineered with enough subtlety that Amara couldn't prove it. She was in the lobby of a building in Gangnam, waiting for an elevator after a client meeting, when Soren walked in from the street. She was alone. She saw Amara and stopped, and for a second they just looked at each other. Soren Han was beautiful in the particular way of women who have been looked at their entire lives and have learned to carry it like armor instead of ornament. She was composed, expensively dressed without appearing to have thought about it. She had the kind of stillness that reminded Amara, uncomfortably, of Jae-hyun. "Mrs. Kong," Soren said. "Ms. Han," Amara said. The elevator arrived. They both got in. The doors closed. Amara pressed the button for the 14th floor. Soren pressed 19. They stood on opposite sides of the elevator and did not speak, and Amara was acutely aware of the specific quality of that silence. Two women who know they are in the same story and are deciding in real time what posture to take. "The merger is moving quickly," Soren said, finally. Not to start a conversation, just to say something that was true. "So I understand," Amara said. "I didn't engineer it," Soren said. Amara looked at her. Soren was looking at the elevator doors. "I know what it looks like. I want you to know I didn't arrange it." "Ms. Han," Amara said carefully, "I don't know what you think I'm assuming, but I'm not—" "You're very controlled," Soren said. "That's not a criticism." She glanced at Amara. "I was controlled too for a long time. I thought it was dignity. Eventually I understood it was just survival." The 14th floor arrived. Amara stepped out and turned back, because she was not someone who let a moment pass without making a choice about it. "Are you warning me about something?" she asked. Soren looked at her steadily. "I'm telling you that you're not imagining what you think you're imagining." The doors closed. Amara stood in the hallway for 4 seconds, then walked to her meeting. She did not think about those words, "You're not imagining what you think you're imagining," until later that night when she was lying awake at 1 in the morning and the sentence came back to her with the weight of something she'd been trying to set down and couldn't. The dinner happened on a Thursday. She hadn't known it was happening until Jae-hyun mentioned it that morning. Not as an invitation, more as an announcement. He had a dinner, it would run late, she shouldn't wait. She had learned not to read things into his tone because his tone didn't carry the kind of information most people's tones carry. But she noticed that he said it to her back while she was making coffee. He usually said things facing her. She didn't turn around. "Okay," she said. She heard him leave. She stood at the kitchen counter and held her coffee cup with both hands and breathed through it. The specific low-grade pain of knowing something you cannot yet name and therefore cannot yet act on. She had gotten very good at breathing through things. That night she worked late and ate alone at the kitchen counter and went to bed before 11. She heard him come in sometime after midnight. He didn't come to the bedroom. She heard the couch in his study and the particular sound of someone settling in for the night in a space that was not quite their space. That was new. The next morning she was already dressed and ready to leave when he came out of his study. He was in yesterday's shirt, his hair not quite right, a look on his face that she had not seen before. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it. The discomfort of a person who is aware they have created a situation they haven't decided how to handle yet. "Good morning," she said, picking up her bag. "Amara, I have a 9 o'clock," she said. "Have a good day." She left. In the elevator, she pressed the lobby button and then stood with her back against the wall and felt her heartbeat, a little too fast, a little too hard, and waited for the doors to open. She was not going to cry in an elevator. She was not going to cry anywhere that was not completely private. She had made herself that promise 2 years ago, and she had kept it every single time. The family dinner at the Kang estate was not her idea. It was never going to be her idea. These events were Madame Kong's territory, her orchestrations, her stages, her productions. Amara attended them because the contract still existed, and because she had her own sense of what she owed to commitments she had made, regardless of how the surrounding circumstances had shifted. She dressed carefully. Not competitively. She never dressed for those events competitively, which she suspected disappointed some of the relatives who would have enjoyed watching her try. She wore something dark and well-cut that she'd had for over a year. She did her own hair. She looked, when she checked the mirror before leaving, like a woman who was completely fine. She had gotten very good at looking completely fine. Jae-hyun met her in the lobby of the building. They had separate cars now, a shift that had happened gradually enough that neither of them had acknowledged it as a shift. He was in a dark suit. He looked at her when she came out and held the door, and they got into the car and drove to the estate in the particular silence that had replaced the earlier silence, the one that no longer felt like weather. It felt like the space after something has already ended, and neither party has said so yet. The estate was full. The Kong extended family ran to significant numbers when assembled, aunts and uncles and cousins, and the various business associates who existed in the indeterminate space between family and organization. Amara moved through it with the ease of practice, remembering names, asking appropriate questions, accepting food she didn't particularly want. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. Madame Kong received her at the entrance with the specific warmth of someone who has decided on their final position and is no longer bothering to perform uncertainty. "You look well," Madame Kong said, taking both of Amara's hands briefly in hers, a gesture that looked like affection and functioned like assessment. "As do you," Amara said. Madame Kong held her gaze for a moment. Something in it. Not cruelty. She was too intelligent for crude cruelty. But acknowledgement. The look of a woman who has decided the outcome and is giving the other party one last chance to reach the same conclusion on their own. Amara smiled at her and went to find a drink. The dinner was long. 14 people around the main table, and the conversation moved across business and family in the Korean way that wove the two together until they were indistinguishable. Amara followed it. Her Korean wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and she had spent 3 years listening carefully enough to understand the texture of conversations, even when she missed specific words. She was seated 4 seats from Jae-hyun. That was new. She had always been seated beside him at family events. She noted it. She did not react to it. The food came in courses, and the wine came with it, and the conversation got louder and warmer the way family dinners do when people have been sitting long enough to forget they were being careful. An uncle told a story that made 3 cousins laugh. A business associate and Jae-hyun's second-in-command had a debate about a port negotiation that required everyone near them to have an opinion. Amara ate and listened and said what was appropriate when appropriate, and she kept her breathing steady, and she watched. She watched Jae-hyun. He was in his element at this table, not warm, but present in a way he wasn't always present. This was his world. These were his people in the most fundamental sense. And whatever else he was or wasn't, he belonged here in a way that was visible in how he held his shoulders differently. Less armored. Not relaxed. She'd never seen him truly relaxed, but less coiled than he was in the outside world. She had loved that about him. The small ways she could see the difference between the public construction and whatever was underneath. Past tense, she noticed. When exactly had her internal language shifted to past tense? Madame Kong set down her chopsticks. She set them down with a specific, deliberate precision that Amara had learned over 3 years to recognize as the precursor to something. It was the sound of a woman who had timed what she was about to say. "It is a relief," Madame Kong said, to the table at large in a tone that was pleasantly conversational and landed like a hand grenade, "that now the proper woman has returned, we can finally correct Jae-hyun's mistake." Someone near the far end of the table made a small sound of agreement. Someone else laughed quietly, in the way people laugh when they're relieved someone else said the thing they'd been thinking. Amara did not move. She was aware of her hands on the table. She was aware of her breathing, in, steady, through the nose, and the specific distance between her and the wall behind her and the specific weight of the room. She was aware of 12 people in her peripheral vision, some of whom had gone still with the alert interest of people watching something they had been expecting, and some of whom were looking very carefully at their plates. She was aware of Jae-hyun at the other end of the table. She looked at him. It was the only thing she allowed herself in that moment. One clear, direct look at her husband across the length of that dining table. He was looking at his glass. He was not looking at her. He was not looking at his mother. He was looking at his glass with the careful stillness of a man who has decided that the best way to be in a moment he does not want to be in is to exist very quietly and wait for it to pass. She waited for him to look up. She waited for him to say something. One word, one redirect, one small, quiet, entirely private-looking signal that communicated, "I see this. I am not participating in this." The moment stretched. She counted her own heartbeats because it was something to do. He did not look up. The conversation resumed around her. Someone asked about a cousin's new apartment. Someone poured more wine. The particular horror of the dinner was that it continued, that the machine of the evening kept running, that the world did not pause to acknowledge what had just happened to her in front of 12 people and 2 household staff. Amara picked up her chopsticks. She finished her plate. She sat at that table for another 40 minutes, and she did not excuse herself early, and she did not let her expression change, and she did not for one visible second, let any of them see what was happening inside her chest, which was something she did not have a word for yet. Not quite grief, not quite rage, but the very specific sensation of a thing you have been carefully protecting for a long time finally going dark. On the drive home, she sat in the back of the car and looked out the window and did not speak, and neither did he. And this silence was the third kind. Not comfortable, not tense, but the silence of something that has already happened and cannot be undone, moving through time in a car on a Seoul street at 10:45 on a Thursday night. At the penthouse, she went to the bedroom. She did not slam the door. She closed it with the most ordinary, unhurried precision she had, because she was not going to give the apartment walls the satisfaction of knowing what this felt like. She sat on the edge of the bed. She breathed. She thought very clearly and without drama about the drawer in her desk, the bottom left drawer, under a folder of documents she'd organized 3 weeks ago, where she had placed an envelope containing papers she'd had prepared 6 weeks before that. She had not been ready to use them then. She had placed them there in the way you place something in a drawer because you are not ready to decide and not ready to throw it away either. She went to the desk. She opened the drawer. The envelope was there where she had left it. She opened it, and she read what was inside, though she knew exactly what it said, and she found that her hands were completely steady. Not numb, not suppressed, but genuinely steady. Because some things, when you've been moving toward them long enough, don't arrive as catastrophes. They arrive as conclusions. She sat at the desk for a long time. Then she signed her name. She signed it the way she signed everything, clearly, completely, with the particular deliberateness she brought to all legal instruments, because this was a legal instrument and she was a lawyer and she knew exactly what she was doing. She put the papers in a clean envelope and placed it on the kitchen table, under the small dish where he always left his keys. Then she went back to the desk and pulled out a notepad, a plain one, nothing special, and picked up a pen. She sat there for a while. She could have written many things. She had composed and discarded approximately 100 sentences in her head over the past 2 months. In the end, she wrote 7 words. She tore the page off neatly and put it with the envelope. Then she went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and began to pack the specific things that were actually hers. Not what had accumulated in this space over 3 years. Not the objects that had blurred into the penthouse until they felt like part of it, but the things she had brought with her, and the things she had bought for herself, and the things that would be hers when she left. Her hand stayed steady the whole time. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul was doing what Seoul always does at that hour. Running, flashing, indifferent to the particular human decisions being made inside one penthouse on the 42nd floor. She looked at it once while she packed. The city did not look back. It did not have to. She was almost finished when she heard his footsteps in the hall. They stopped outside the bedroom door. He knocked. Something he had never done before, not once in 3 years, and the fact that he knocked now told her that he already knew something had shifted, that something in the apartment had a different weight. He had noticed. Of course he had noticed. She zipped the bag. "Come in," she said. The door opened. He stood in the doorway and looked at the bag on the bed and at her standing next to it in her coat, and his face did what his face rarely did. It showed something unguarded for just long enough that she could see it before the discipline came back down. "Amara," he said. "I left everything on the kitchen table," she said. "Park can coordinate the legal processing. I've already contacted my attorney." "Wait. Jae-hyun." Her voice was not cold. It was something harder than cold. "I'm not having this conversation tonight." "Then when?" She picked up the bag. "I'll be in touch about the formal process." He stepped into the room, not to block her, not physical in his response, just moving toward her the way someone reaches for something they realize, too late, they're about to lose. I didn't, he started. I know what you didn't, she said. That's not the same as what you did. She walked past him, through the hallway, past the kitchen where the envelope sat under the key dish, past the living room where the reading light was still on from earlier that evening, to the front door. She opened it. The elevator was at the far end of the hall. She pressed the call button. Behind her, she heard him in the doorway, not following her, just standing there. She did not turn around. The elevator arrived and opened. She stepped inside. She pressed the lobby button. The doors began to close. In the last inch of space before they shut completely, she heard him say her name again. Not the controlled version, not the one he used across boardroom tables and dinner tables and every other table she had sat across from him at, but something rawer than that, something that sounded like a man arriving at an understanding slightly too late to do anything useful with it. The doors closed. She rode down 42 floors and walked out into the Seoul night, and the air hit her face and she stood on the sidewalk for one moment with her bag and the city around her, and then she hailed a cab and got in and told the driver her destination. She did not look back at the building. There was nothing to look back at that she hadn't already seen. She checked into a hotel that night. Not a bad one, not a dramatic one. A clean, mid-range business hotel in Mapogu that she had stayed in once before during a period when the penthouse was being renovated and she had needed somewhere quiet to work. She remembered it had good lighting in the rooms and a desk that was the right height. That was what she needed. A desk. A room with a door that was only hers. She set her bag down and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall for approximately 3 minutes. Then she opened her laptop and started working. This was not avoidance. This was just what she did. She had a filing due in 4 days for an international arbitration case she'd been handling on contract for a firm in Singapore, and the work was there and it needed doing, and it was hers in a way that nothing in the last 3 years had been entirely hers. So she worked. She worked until 2:30 in the morning, ordered something from the hotel kitchen that she ate without tasting, and then she lay down and closed her eyes and did not sleep for a long time. When she did sleep, she did not dream about him. She considered that a small victory. The attorney she called in the morning was a woman named Ji Yeon-soo, a family law specialist she had identified and quietly consulted 8 weeks earlier. Not to start anything, she had told herself at the time, just to understand the landscape, just to know. Ji was sharp, practical, and refreshingly uninterested in the emotional dimensions of what Amara was navigating. The contract is straightforward, Ji said across the table of her office near Seocho. You signed with an explicit term. You're outside the original window. Either party can initiate. He hasn't, Amara said. He may not have been in a position to, Ji said neutrally, or he may have been waiting for you to. Does it matter which? Ji looked at her. Not legally. Then let's proceed. Ji pulled out a folder. There's one complication. Amara looked at her. The financial structure of the original agreement is entangled with several of the business protections extended to your family's firm in Lagos. When the arrangement was formalized, those protections were embedded in holding agreements rather than separated. If the marriage is formally dissolved through standard channels, the legal architecture unwinding, it could create instability for those subsidiary agreements. Amara was quiet for a moment. Meaning your family's firm could lose its protective structure. Not immediately, not automatically, but the exposure window opens. If someone were watching for that window and wanted to move into it, someone already tried to destroy that firm once, Amara said. Yes, Ji said. I'm aware. The quiet in the room had a specific weight to it. Amara sat with it and let herself feel the full shape of what she was looking at. She had signed the papers. She had left. She had walked out of the elevator and into the Seoul night with her bag in her steady hands and the 7 words she'd written on a notepad, and she had believed, in the particular way you believe things that cost you enormously, that she had made a clean decision. There was no clean decision. There never had been. It had just taken until now to see the whole structure. How long do I have before the exposure becomes real? She said. 60 days to restructure the agreements before the dissolution triggers the instability, Ji said. Maybe 90 if the processing moves slowly. And if I need to restructure, I'd need access to the holding company documents. You'd need cooperation from the Kong organization, Ji said, or a very aggressive legal strategy. What kind of cooperation? Voluntary disclosure of the subsidiary structure. Someone on their side would need to agree to facilitate the separation. Ji paused. Mr. Kong could do it directly if he chose to. Amara looked out the window at the street below. A delivery bike moving fast. A woman with a stroller waiting at a crosswalk. I'll handle it, she said. She left Ji's office and stood on the pavement outside and breathed the cold November air and felt the specific quality of what this was. Not a reversal, not a reason to go back, but a complication she had not accounted for, which was different. She had walked out of that penthouse with the moral clarity of someone who has made the right choice. The right choice had just shown her its back end. She took out her phone and called her father. He answered on the second ring, the way he always did, and she heard in the background the sound of the Lagos office. The printer, someone's voice, the particular acoustic texture of a space that had survived more than it should have had to. Baba, she said, my daughter. He said it the way he always said it, warm and immediate, and she closed her eyes for a second. You sound tired. I'm fine, she said. I need to ask you something. She explained it clearly. She did not dramatize it or soften it excessively. She told him about the dissolution, the entanglement, the exposure window. She heard him go quiet in the way he went quiet when he was thinking seriously. Not worried silence, not panicked silence, but the silence of a man who has navigated enough difficult situations to know that the first step is to actually understand the problem. You signed the papers, he said finally. Yes. Good, he said. She hadn't expected that. Baba, I didn't build this firm for you to protect it by staying somewhere that's costing you, he said. We'll manage the legal situation. You and I. Like we've managed everything else. She pressed her fingers against the bridge of her nose and breathed. It's not simple. Nothing worth protecting ever is, he said. Come home for a few weeks if you can. We'll work on it together. She couldn't go home. She had the Singapore arbitration and 2 other pending matters, and she needed to be in Seoul for the immediate legal steps. But she stayed on the phone with him for 20 minutes, standing on the pavement outside Ji's office, and by the time she hung up, she had a cleaner sense of what needed to happen next. She needed to talk to Jae-hyun, not as his wife, not as the woman who had packed a bag and left, as the counterparty and a legal instrument who needed specific cooperation to ensure the dissolution didn't damage people it had no business damaging. She composed a message. Brief, formal, requesting a meeting at a time and place of his choosing, citing the legal complexity as the reason. She sent it. He responded in 11 minutes. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. The private room at a restaurant in Jongno she recognized, and they had eaten there twice during the early months of the arrangement, before the arrangement became something more complicated than an arrangement. She did not read anything into the choice of location. She confirmed the time and put her phone away and went back to her work. The meeting was not what she had prepared for. She arrived first, which she had intended. She always preferred to be in a room before the person she was meeting, to have a moment to understand the space before the dynamic shifted. The private room was small and quiet. Tea was brought. She sat with her hands on the table and her notes in a folder and her legal brain fully engaged. He arrived 6 minutes later. He was in a dark coat, no tie, looking like a man who had slept approximately as well as she had. He sat across from her and looked at her with the particular focused attention he brought to everything, and she looked back, and for a moment neither of them spoke. I reviewed the holding structure, he said. Park flagged it this morning. Then you understand the issue, she said. Yes. I need voluntary cooperation to separate the subsidiary agreements before the dissolution is processed. I'm not asking you to delay anything or contest anything. I'm asking for access to the documents and your organization's sign-off on the restructuring. I know what you're asking, he said. Then can you provide it? He was quiet for a moment. Not calculating. She would have recognized calculation. This was something else. Your father's firm, he said. What's the current operating position? Stable, she said. They rebuilt after the last incident. I'm not going to let them be exposed again because of paperwork. He looked at her. Not at her face, at her in the particular way she had learned over 3 years meant he was actually present and not running parallel processes in the background. I'll instruct Park to give your attorney full access. The sign-off will be ready within 72 hours. She nodded. Thank you. Amara. She looked up. The note, he said. The 7 words. She had wondered if he would bring it up. She had written, You never had to love me, but you didn't have to waste me either. She had counted. That was 15 words. She supposed under pressure she was less concise than she thought. It said what I needed to say, she said. I know, he said. I've read it approximately 40 times. She did not let that land anywhere it could do damage. She kept her expression neutral and her hands flat on the table and her breathing even. The legal process will proceed regardless, she said. I know that too. Then we understand each other. Do we? He said, and it wasn't a challenge. It was an actual question, asked with a flatness that she recognized as the way he talked when he wasn't performing anything. She put her notes back in the folder and closed it. What do you want from this conversation, Jae-hyun? He looked at his tea. He had not touched it. I want to know if I destroyed something that could have been… Don't, she said. Quiet, clear, not angry. Don't do that tonight. Do the legal paperwork. Let Park coordinate with G. Let the process move. She picked up the folder in her coat. That's what tonight is for. She stood. He looked up at her. You'll have your attorney's confirmation by Thursday, he said. Good, she said. Good night. She walked out. The confirmation came by Thursday, as promised. G processed the restructuring with the Kang organization's cooperation and told Amara the exposure window had been closed cleanly. The dissolution would proceed through standard channels. Expected timeline, 6 to 8 weeks for full legal processing, 6 to 8 weeks. Amara noted it and went back to the Singapore arbitration. She found a short-term furnished apartment in Mapo, 2 rooms, good light, a kitchen she could actually cook in. She had her mail redirected. She bought a plant. She slept better in her second week than she had in months, which she chose to interpret as information rather than indictment. She was 2 weeks into the new apartment when she got the call from Soren Han. She almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved, but she recognized it from the brief exchange of contact details that had happened through intermediaries when the merger was producing legal questions that overlapped with some of Amara's ongoing work. She looked at the phone for 2 rings and then answered. Ms. Ellis, Soren said. Said she had dropped the Kong. Ms. Han, Amara said. I need to meet with you, not about business. Then about what? A pause. Short. About something I should have told you before you left. They met at a cafe in Hongdae. Neutral territory, nothing connected to either of their worlds. Soren was already there when Amara arrived. She was dressed down by her standards, a gray coat, her hair simple, and she looked in person like a woman carrying something she was about to set down, whether or not it was welcome. Amara sat across from her, ordered coffee, waited. I'm going to tell you something, Soren said. And I want you to know I'm not telling you to make anything happen. I'm not telling you because I have a stake in the outcome. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the full picture of what you were living in. Okay, Amara said. Soren wrapped both hands around her cup. The scandal that brought you into this. The incident with Jae-hyun and me, the one that damaged his reputation and created the need for what you were brought in for. I'm familiar with the general outline, Amara said. The outline is wrong, Soren said. Or, not wrong. Incomplete. She looked at Amara directly. Jae-hyun didn't end the engagement because of the scandal. The scandal was created because the engagement was already over. His organization needed a public reason that protected certain business relationships. So a private ending became a public one, with a story attached that served other purposes. Amara was quiet. He ended it, Soren said, because he realized he'd been treating me the way he treated every other variable in his world, as something to manage. He told me that, directly. It was the most honest thing he ever said to me, and it cost him the engagement and the story that came with it. She paused. He knew what he was doing. He ended it because he saw what he was doing to someone and chose not to keep doing it. You're telling me he has a conscience, Amara said. I'm telling you it took him years to find it, Soren said. And I'm telling you that the man who brought you into this arrangement, whatever his reasons at the start, is not the same man who sat at that dinner table and said nothing. Amara looked at her. Then what is he? Someone who understood too late what he was losing and who is trying to figure out what, if anything, he can do about it. Soren's jaw tightened slightly. He came to see me 3 days after you left. Something moved through Amara's chest, quick and cold. Why are you telling me that? Because he didn't come to rekindle anything, Soren said. He came to ask me what he did wrong with us. He wanted to understand the pattern. She looked at the table. He sat across from me for 2 hours and asked questions about his own behavior, like a man doing a post-mortem on himself. It was uncomfortable to watch. Kang Jae-hyun being genuinely uncomfortable is... She paused. It's not something I expected to ever see. Amara sat with that. She sat with it carefully, the way you hold something that has the potential to shift your balance if you're not careful about where you put your weight. This doesn't change what happened, she said. No, Soren said. It doesn't. It doesn't change the dinner, the silence, the 3 years. No, Soren said again. I know. Then why? Because you're a lawyer, Soren said, with a precision that landed. And you deserve to make your decisions with complete information, not with the version that's easiest to walk away from. She picked up her cup. I'm not asking you to do anything with this. I'm just making sure you actually know what you're walking away from. Amara looked at the table, at the grain of the wood, at her own hands flat against it. She thought about the reading light she had left on, the tea that appeared in the kitchen, her name said in a specific way that meant he was actually thinking of her. 42 floors in an elevator, and a voice saying her name in the last inch before the doors closed. She thought about the 7 words she had written, 15 words actually, she had miscounted. She thought about her father saying, I didn't build this firm for you to protect it by staying somewhere that's costing you. She looked up at Soren Han. Does he know you're telling me this? No, Soren said. Would he want you to? Soren considered it. Probably not. He'd consider it an intrusion on something he thought he should handle himself. A brief pause. He just hasn't figured out how to handle it himself yet. Amara finished her coffee. She put the cup down and looked at the window and the street outside, and the particular gray quality of the November light in Seoul, which was not kind light, not flattering light, but honest light. The kind that shows you exactly what things are. She needed to think. She went home to the Mapo apartment and sat at her desk and did not open her laptop. She sat there and thought, not emotionally, not reactively, but with the slow, careful, methodical attention she brought to complex legal problems. Because this was a complex problem, and she was a person who solved complex problems. She mapped it out the way she would map a case. What she knew, what she'd been told, what remained unverified, what the available evidence suggested about the likely truth. What she knew, 3 years. Silence at a dinner table, a voice in an elevator, divorce papers under a key dish. What she'd been told, a man doing a post-mortem on himself. Questions asked in an uncomfortable room. Information gathered too late, in the wrong sequence. What remained unverified, whether any of it constituted a change in something structural, or whether it was the predictable response of a man encountering loss for possibly the first time in his professional life, and not having the vocabulary for it yet. She didn't have the answer to that last question. She was still sitting at the desk 40 minutes later when her phone rang. Not Soren, not Ji, not her father. Jae-hyun. She looked at the name on the screen for 3 full rings. 4, she answered. I know it's late, he said. It's 8:30, she said. I need to tell you something. He paused. Not about the legal process. I need to tell you something about the night of the dinner. She waited. When my mother said what she said, he started, and then stopped. She heard him exhale, a sound she recognized, the sound he made when he was pushing past the part of himself that didn't want to say the next thing. I heard it. I heard every word of it, and I knew what it was costing you, and I said nothing. I know, she said. I said nothing, he repeated, because I had spent 3 years building a way of existing with you that didn't require me to be afraid of losing you. Because I had decided, without telling you, without asking you, that the safest way to have you in my life was to never officially have you. Does that make sense? It made terrible, precise sense. Yes, she said. Her voice was steady. I need you to know that the silence wasn't indifference, he said. It was the worst version of something that might have been, at the start, a kind of self-protection that I never examined. Another pause. I examined it after you left. Jae-hyun. I know, he said. I know it doesn't change the dinner. It doesn't change any of it, she said. That's not... She stopped. Started again. That's not how repair works. You don't get to explain the damage and have it become undone. I'm not asking for it to be undone, he said. I'm asking for... I don't know what I'm asking for. She closed her eyes. She pressed her free hand flat against the desk. I need time, she said. The process is running. G and Park are coordinating. I need to let the legal steps complete, and I need time that isn't being managed by anything outside myself. How much time? He said. She opened her eyes. I don't know yet. A silence. Long enough that she almost asked if he was still there. Okay, he said finally. Okay, she said. She ended the call and sat in the quiet apartment with Seoul outside the window and her hands in her lap, and the specific feeling of a person who has been walking in one direction for a long time and has just looked up and realized the path has forked without them noticing, and both directions are still dark, and they are standing at the split with no map and no particular confidence about which way the ground is solid. She had left because she had to. She had signed because she was right to. She had walked out of that elevator because the woman she was could not have done anything else. But she was beginning to understand, slowly, with the reluctance of someone who has paid a very high price for a very clear position, that the woman she was becoming might be more complicated than the woman who had left. And she did not yet know what to do with that. The next morning, her phone rang at 6:47. Too early for G, too early for her Singapore contact, a number she didn't recognize. She answered it the way she answered all unknown numbers at unusual hours, with the controlled alertness of someone who has learned that surprising calls tend to require immediate decisions. The voice on the other end was not one she knew. Ms. Ellis, the man said. My name is Lee Dong-wook. I work in risk management for a competing organization. I need you to understand something about your husband's current situation before you finalize your divorce, because what you don't know about the next 30 days could make your family's legal problems look like a minor inconvenience. She sat up straight in the dark of the bedroom. What organization? She said. The kind, the man said, that has been watching the Kong Empire look vulnerable since the moment the Ghost King's wife packed a bag and walked out, and has been planning accordingly. She did not hang up. That was the first decision, made in the first 2 seconds, in the dark of her bedroom at 6:47 in the morning, with her heart doing something loud and unpleasant against her ribs. She did not hang up, because hanging up was what a frightened person did, and she needed, in this moment, to be something other than frightened. How did you get this number? She said. Ms. Ellis, Lee Dong-wook said, with the particular patience of someone who has rehearsed this call, the number is the least interesting thing about this conversation. Then get to the interesting part. A brief pause. She heard something in the background, an office maybe, or a car. People who made calls like this at 6:47 usually weren't doing it from comfortable places. Kang Jae-hyun has been consolidating the Eastern distribution network for the past 8 months, Lee said. It's made him significantly more powerful than he was a year ago, and significantly more exposed. There are 3 organizations that have been waiting for a moment when his attention was divided. Your departure created that moment. Another pause. We've been tracking movement from one of those organizations for the past 2 weeks. They're not waiting any longer. What do you want from me? She said. Information, he said. Specifically, anything you may have seen or heard during your time in that household that relates to the Eastern network structure. Safe houses, financial routing, personnel, any of it. She sat very still. You're asking me to give you intelligence on my husband's organization, she said. Your estranged husband, he said, who is currently in the process of finalizing a divorce you initiated, who sat silently while his mother publicly humiliated you in front of his entire family. I'm aware of my own life, she said. Then you're aware that you owe Kang Jae-hyun nothing, Lee said, and that whatever you may have observed during 3 years in that penthouse could be worth a very great deal to people with the right motivation to use it. Her jaw tightened. She looked at the dark ceiling above her bed and breathed through the next 4 seconds and made sure her voice was completely even before she spoke again. I'm a lawyer, she said. I don't traffic in intelligence. I don't trade information about private individuals for whatever you're offering, and I don't have conversations with people I don't know about activities that could expose me to criminal liability. She paused. And if you call this number again, I will report this contact to every relevant authority I have access to, and I have considerable access. Silence on the line. Ms. Ellis, he said, the patience thinning slightly now. You should think carefully about your family's position before she ended the call. She sat in the dark for a moment. Then she turned on the bedside light and sat with it and let herself feel the full shape of what had just happened, because denying it or minimizing it was not going to be useful. Someone had her personal number. Someone had been watching the situation closely enough to time a call to the exact period of her maximum legal and emotional exposure. Someone had decided that a woman who had just walked out of the Ghost King's life might be a usable asset. They were wrong about what she was. But they were right that the timing was deliberate, and that meant the situation around Jae-hyun was moving faster than he might know. She picked up her phone and called him. He answered on the first ring, which meant he had been awake. She noted that without deciding what it meant. "I just received a call," she said. "A man named Lee Dong-wook. He said he works in risk management for a competing organization. He asked me for intelligence on your network structure." She heard something shift on his end, a very slight sound, the kind that happens when a person's body responds to information before their mind has processed it. He mentioned the Eastern Distribution Consolidation. He said 3 organizations have been watching for a vulnerability window and that my leaving created one. A silence that lasted exactly long enough to tell her he was not surprised by the substance, only by the channel. "Are you somewhere safe?" he said. "I'm in my apartment." "The Mapo address." She went cold for half a second. "How do you know that address?" "I've known it since your second week there," he said, and his voice was completely flat, which she had learned meant he was extremely focused and not interested in managing her reaction to what he was saying. "I had security maintain a passive awareness of your location, not surveillance. No one entered your space. No one monitored your activities. Perimeter only. In case something like this happened." She wanted to be angry about that. She filed the anger for later because later was when she could afford it. "How serious is the threat?" she said. "Serious enough that I've had 2 nights without sleep managing the early movement," he said. "Serious enough that Lee Dong-wook calling you directly tells me they're accelerating. They want leverage or they want disruption. Using you as either is—" He stopped. "Is what?" she said. "It's something I should have anticipated and didn't," he said, "because I was focused on the wrong things." "Jae-hyun." She pressed her palm flat against her thigh. "What do you need?" A pause. "I need you to not be in that apartment for the next 48 hours. I have a filing due in— I know about the Singapore arbitration," he said. "You can work from anywhere. I need you somewhere with security I can verify." "I'm not coming back to the penthouse," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to." Another pause. "There's a property in Itaewon. It belongs to one of my holding companies, but it's not connected to my name in any searchable way. It has a security team that doesn't advertise itself. You'd have full independence, your own space, your own work, no obligation of any kind. It's purely logistical." She looked at the window. The first gray light of early morning was starting to define the edges of the curtains. "Send me the address," she said. "I'll make my own way there." She heard something that was not quite relief but was adjacent to it. "I'll have it to you in 10 minutes. She got up and started packing a bag before the address arrived. The Itaewon property was a narrow 4-story building on a side street that looked, from the outside, like exactly the kind of unremarkable residential structure you don't look twice at. Inside it was clean, spare, and well-organized. The kitchen stocked, the internet fast, a workspace on the 3rd floor with windows that looked out over rooftops. 2 men she didn't know acknowledged her arrival with nods and took a position in the ground floor entrance area without explanation or ceremony. She set up her laptop. She filed 40 pages of arbitration documentation by noon. At 2 in the afternoon, Jae-hyun arrived. She heard him on the stairs, not his usual measured tread, but something faster, and when he came through the door of the 3rd floor workspace, he had the look of a man who had been moving at a speed he didn't usually show. His coat was wet from the rain that had started an hour ago. His jaw was set in the particular way it got when multiple things were happening simultaneously, and he was holding all of them. He stopped when he saw her, looked at her. Some of the speed drained out of his posture. "You're working," he said. "Arbitration deadline," she said. "What happened?" He came in and sat in the chair across from her desk. Not taking the room over, not directing anything, just sitting down like a man who has been standing for a long time and needs a minute. She had never seen him walk into a room and need a minute before. It changed the geometry of him in a way she wasn't prepared for. Lee Dong-wook is a mid-level operator for the Shin Group, he said. They've been the most patient of the three. The other two have made moves I've been containing for the past week. Shin calling you directly means they've decided patience isn't working and they're shifting to destabilization. Using me as the destabilizing element, she said. Yes, because they think I'm a pressure point. He looked at her steadily. Yes. She sat with that, with the specific quality of being someone's pressure point, with what that meant about what she was to him, whether or not it aligned with how she'd been treated. Evidence, she reminded herself. Evidence was not the same as intent. Can you contain the Shin movement? She said. I can, he said. It's going to require direct action in the next 24 hours. I have the resources. I have the personnel. What I don't have... He stopped. His hands were on his knees. She noticed they were not quite still. What? She said. There's a meeting tonight, he said. The three organizations coordinated. They're meeting to formalize a joint action against my Eastern network. If that meeting reaches a consensus, the consolidated pressure will be harder to manage independently. He looked at the table between them. I have someone inside the Shin Group. He's confirmed the location and the time. But the information they're meeting on, the specific vulnerabilities they're going to target, came from inside my organization. The room went quiet. You have a leak, she said. I have someone who's been feeding operational details to at least one of the three groups for the past 6 months, he said. Someone close enough to my structure to know the Eastern Network consolidation timeline. Someone who would have known that my personal situation was shifting before it became visible. His jaw tightened. I've narrowed it to 4 people. Who? She said. He looked at her. Choi, his assistant. The precise, quiet man who had adjusted her scheduling coordination without explanation. She felt something cold move through her. Choi, who has been with you 6 years, she said. Yes. What makes you certain? The information that leaked maps to access points that Choi had and 4 others didn't, he said. I've been running the cross-reference for 72 hours. It maps to him every time. 72 hours, she said. You've known for 3 days. I've suspected for 3 days, he said. Suspicion isn't action, not with someone who's been... He stopped, set his jaw. I needed to be certain. And now you are. Now I am. She looked at him. At the specific cost of this, visible in how he was sitting, in the set of his shoulders and the flatness of his voice, and the hands that were not quite still. 6 years. Chae-hyun did not trust people. He had chosen to trust Choi in the particular limited way he chose to trust anyone, and that choice had been used against him for 6 months while he was managing his empire and his failing marriage and whatever was happening underneath all of it. She recognized the feeling, the specific devastation of discovering that someone you trusted with proximity, not love, not warmth, just the deep functional trust of daily life, had been somewhere else the whole time. What do you need? She said. Tonight I need to be at a meeting that I cannot visibly attend, he said. My inside contact will be there. He needs confirmation of what to do with the information once the Shin Group commits to their plan. If they commit tonight, I have a 12-hour window to move on the Eastern Network and remove the vulnerabilities before the joint action can be coordinated. He paused. The problem is communication. My usual channels are compromised if Choi has been feeding them. I need a clean relay, someone outside my organization who can move without being watched. She understood what he was asking before he finished saying it. You want me to be your communications relay, she said. I want to give you the choice, he said, which was a different thing, and they both knew it. She looked at the window. The rain was heavier now, running down the glass in irregular tracks. She thought about Ji's office, and 60 days, and the exposure window. She thought about Lee Dong-wook's voice at 6:47 in the morning. She thought about her father's firm and 22 years of work, and the specific cost of watching something you built get used as leverage by people who had built nothing. She thought about Soren Han across a cafe table, saying, I'm just making sure you actually know what you're walking away from. She had not made a decision about that yet. But this was not that decision. This was a different one. Give me the contact protocol, she said, and tell me everything about the inside man. His name was Baek Jun-ho, and he had been inside the Shin Group for 14 months under a cover identity that Jae-hyun's organization had built with the kind of investment that meant they couldn't burn him without losing something expensive and irreplaceable. He was 31, former military intelligence, and he communicated through a system that used civilian channels, a specific series of actions on public platforms that encoded information in pattern rather than content. Amara understood the system in 12 minutes because it was structurally similar to certain document authentication methods she'd worked with in compliance cases, and she had always been faster at pattern recognition than most people expected. Tae-hyun watched her work through it. "You understand this," he said. "It's a substitution cipher built on behavioral patterns instead of characters," she said. "It's elegant. Who designed it?" "Bayek," he said. "He has a background in mathematical linguistics," she said. "Yes, I can see that." She looked up. "When does the meeting start?" 9 p.m. It was currently 3:45. "And Choi," she said. "Where is he?" "At the office," Jae-hyun said. "Under observation. He doesn't know he's been identified. I need him in place and calm until after tonight's window closes. If he runs, the Shin group gets spooked and the meeting moves." "You're holding him in place by not moving on him yet," she said. "Yes. That's a significant risk." "Everything about the next 18 hours is a significant risk," he said. "I'm aware." She closed the laptop. She turned to face him fully. "If I do this, say, if I act as your relay tonight, it doesn't change anything about the legal process." "I know," he said. "It doesn't change what I said in that elevator. I know. I'm doing this because the Shin group called my number at 6:47 in the morning," she said. "Because they decided I was a usable piece in something that has nothing to do with me. And I don't let other people use me. I let you do it for 3 years without calling it what it was, but I'm done with that. I'm helping tonight because I choose to, on my own terms, for my own reasons." He looked at her. The careful control of his face had something underneath it that she had seen exactly twice before. Once on the night she'd first mentioned the litigation in Brussels, and he'd looked at her like he was recalibrating something, and once in the doorway of their bedroom with the bag on the bed and her coat already on. "I understand," he said. "Good," she said. "Now, tell me everything about tonight's location." The meeting was in a private space in a building in Yongsan, 3 floors of what officially functioned as a logistics company, the upper level reserved for the kind of gathering that didn't exist on any calendar. Beck's first signal came through at 7:42, a pattern of activity on 2 separate platforms that told Amara he was inside in position and the 3 groups were assembling. She was in the Itaewon property, 3rd floor, laptop open, phone on the desk, the cipher key Jae-hyun had left her handwritten on a single sheet of paper. He was somewhere else. She didn't ask where, because operational positioning was his domain, and not knowing gave her cleaner hands if anything went wrong. She decoded Baek's first message in 4 minutes, relayed it through the clean channel, got confirmation back in 2. Then she waited. The second signal came at 8:51. She decoded it, relayed it, and felt her pulse in her throat in a way she was aware of but not governed by. The message told Jae-hyun that the Shin group was pushing for a 48-hour action timeline. The other 2 groups wanted 72. The dispute was real and was buying time. Third signal, 9:23. She was getting faster. The encoding was starting to feel intuitive in the way that complex systems did when you'd spent enough time with them. Not easy, but readable, the logic revealing itself through repetition. This one was longer, more specific. She worked through it with her pen on the paper beside the cipher key, checking and rechecking, because she was not going to relay something she was 70% confident about when the margin for error was this specific. 100%. She sent it. Then Beck went silent for 22 minutes. She sat in the silence and did not spiral. She noted the time. She noted the length of the gap. She ran the probabilities the way she ran probabilities in arbitration, calmly, without investing in a preferred outcome. The most likely explanation was that something in the meeting had shifted and Beck was adapting. The second most likely was a technical issue. The third, which she noted and set aside, was that something had gone wrong in a way that was not recoverable. At 9:51, the signal came back. She grabbed the pen and started working before the pattern had fully resolved, and then she stopped. Because what she was looking at was not a continuation of the established pattern. It was a distress marker. She had asked Jae-hyun, when he walked her through the system, what the abort signal looked like. He had told her. She had memorized it the way she memorized everything she needed to act on, completely, without relying on notes. What she was looking at was the abort signal. She picked up the phone, called the contact number he'd given her. It rang twice and connected to a voice she didn't recognize, one of his people, she assumed. Relay abort, she said. Bayek has sent the abort marker, 9:51. Hold, the voice said. She held. 40 seconds. The rain outside was loud against the window. Confirmed, the voice said. We're moving. What does moving mean, she said. What does that mean for Bayek? Extraction protocol is active, the voice said. Is he in immediate danger? A pause that lasted 1 second too long. We're moving. The line went quiet. She set the phone down. She stood up and walked to the window and looked at the wet rooftops and the rain and the yellow lights of Itaewon below, and she breathed, in through the nose, steady, 4 counts, and she did not let herself do anything other than stand there and be present in the room, because there was nothing she could do in the next stretch of time except wait and be ready and not fall apart in the interim. At 10:17, Jae-hyun called. Bayek is out, he said. His voice was different than she had ever heard it. Not shaken, Jae-hyun did not shake, but compressed, the particular quality of a voice that is operating under load. What happened? She said. Choi, he said. He made contact with the Shin group sometime in the past 6 hours and told them about Beck. He burned his own cover by doing it, which means he knew we were close to identifying him and decided to move first. A breath. Short. He left the building at 9:40. You lost him. I have people looking, he said. He won't get far. And the meeting? Dispersed when Beck sent the abort. They'll regroup, but the timeline is broken. I have 12 hours to move on the network before they reconsolidate. His voice was steady now, fully compressed, fully focused. All of the weight of the situation pulled into the center of him where he carried things. Amara. Yes, she said. What you did tonight. Don't, she said. Not unkindly. A silence. The relay was clean, she said. The cipher took me some time on the third signal, but I verified before sending. I don't think I missed anything. You didn't, he said. Bayek confirmed. The relay was exact. Good, she said. Are you all right? He said. She thought about it, actually thought about it, instead of answering automatically. I'm functional, she said, which is what tonight required. She heard him breathe. Stay at the Itaewon property tonight. I don't want you. I wasn't planning to move, she said. Go manage your 12 hours, Jae-hyun. A pause that felt like more than a pause. I'll check in at 6, he said. I'll be awake, she said. She ended the call and sat back down at the desk and looked at the cipher key on the paper beside her laptop, at her own handwriting working through the third signal's decode. She had good handwriting. She had always had good handwriting. Her father had made her practice as a child, said a lawyer's hand is a lawyer's first argument. She folded the paper in half. She set it aside. She opened the arbitration file and looked at where she'd left off. And for a moment the text swam slightly. Not from fear, not from exhaustion exactly, but from the specific friction of moving between two versions of the night she'd just lived through, the professional and the something else, the relay and the waiting, and the woman at the window counting her own breaths. She pressed her fingers flat against the desk. She started reading. She had managed approximately 2 pages when the security man from the ground floor appeared in the doorway. He was not one of the two she'd been introduced to. He was someone she hadn't seen before, and he was breathing too fast, and the look on his face was the specific look of a person delivering information they have been trained to deliver calmly and are failing at. Ms. Ellis, he said, we have a situation at the perimeter. She looked at him. Choi Min-jun was just identified 2 streets from this location. The room went very still around her. He's not alone, the man said. She stood up from the desk. Not fast. Fast was panic, and panic was the enemy of the next 10 minutes. She stood up with the deliberate, controlled motion of someone who has decided that the situation is serious, and that serious situations require clarity, not speed. She looked at the security man in the doorway. How many? She said. We've confirmed 3, he said. Possibly more in the surrounding streets. Choi is stationary 2 blocks east. He's not moving. He's positioning. Which means he's waiting for something, she said. Or someone. Yes. She picked up her phone, called Jae-hyun. It rang once and connected. Choi is 2 blocks from the Itaewon property, she said, with people. Your security here has confirmed 3 at minimum. A silence that lasted 1 second. 1 second was a long time for Jae-hyun. How long ago? He said. Just now. They're stationary. He's positioning, not moving. He's waiting for authorization from the Shin group, Jae-hyun said. The meeting dispersed, but Shin himself would have given Choi a secondary directive before it broke. He's waiting for a go signal. She could hear him moving, not running, but moving with intent. I'm 12 minutes from you. Your security team here is enough to hold a perimeter for 12 minutes, he said. Do not go to ground level. Stay on the 3rd floor, away from the windows. I know how to take cover, Jae-hyun. I know you do, he said, and there was something in his voice under the compression, not softness, that wasn't the word, but something that belonged to a person and not a function. 12 minutes. He ended this call. She looked at the security man. What's your name? Sergeant O, he said. Retired. Sergeant O, she said. What's the most defensible position on this floor? He pointed to the interior wall opposite the windows, beside the doorway. Away from glass. Structural wall, she assessed. Older building, concrete core. She picked up the cipher notes, her phone, and her laptop and moved to that wall and sat down on the floor with her back against it. Because sitting on the floor against a structural wall was not dignified, but it was practical, and she had already established tonight that she was choosing practical. She opened the laptop. She kept working on the arbitration. Sergeant O looked at her for a moment. Interior work, she said without looking up. The alternative is sitting here counting minutes, and that's not useful. He stationed himself at the door and didn't comment further. She read 3 more pages. Her eyes processed the words. Some part of her brain engaged with the argument being made in the filing. The other part of her brain was tracking the sound of the building, the quality of silence from the floor below, the specific rhythm of Sergeant O's breathing, which was steady and professional and told her he was not afraid, which was useful information. 8 minutes in, she heard something on the floor below. Not dramatic, not the crash of an entry breach, but footsteps that were wrong, moving in a pattern that didn't match the 2 security men she'd been introduced to on arrival. She closed the laptop. Sergeant O was already at the door, his hand inside his jacket. He held up 1 finger toward her. Wait. She held. He moved into the hallway and she lost visual on him, and she sat against the structural wall and listened. 2 voices. Low. A brief exchange in Korean that moved too fast for her functional level of the language to fully parse. She caught structure and kong and a word that meant approximately dispose of or manage, the context-specific version. Then a sound that was not a gunshot but was related to one, muffled, from a floor below. Then Sergeant O came back to the doorway. He had blood on his left hand. Not his, or at least not appearing to be his, based on how he was moving. One of theirs made the 2nd floor, he said. He's been managed. Are you hurt? She said. Minor, he said. The other 2 are holding the ground level. How much longer? She said. He checked his phone. 7 minutes. She breathed. Okay. She did not pick up the laptop again. She sat with her back against the wall and her phone in her hands, and she looked at the ceiling of the Itaewon property and thought, with a clarity that surprised her given the circumstances, about the specific series of decisions that had brought her to this floor, in this building, on this night. The contract she had signed in Lagos, the elevator in the conference building on the 42nd floor, the reading light left on, the tea. She thought about how far a person could travel from the version of themselves that made the first decision, and whether that was a failure or just how living worked. She was still thinking about it when she heard the vehicles outside. More than one, moving fast and then stopping with a precision that told her the people inside them had done this before and knew exactly what they were doing. Sergeant O went to the window at the far end of the hallway, not directly in front of it, to the side, the correct position, and looked down and exhaled through his nose in a way that told her the vehicles were the right ones. 4 minutes later, Jae-hyun was on the 3rd floor. He came through the door and stopped when he saw her sitting on the floor against the wall with her phone in her hands. And for one unguarded moment, his face did the thing it had done in the bedroom doorway when she'd had the bag packed and the coat on. The thing where the discipline slipped just enough to show what was underneath. He crossed the room in 4 steps and crouched down in front of her. He was in a dark jacket, no tie, the same clothes from earlier in the day. There was nothing visibly wrong with him, no damage, no disarray. But he was close to her, and his eyes were doing the thing where they moved across her face quickly, cataloging, and she understood that he was checking on her and did not know quite how to do it without making it something larger than the immediate situation required. "I'm fine," she said. "I can see that," he said. "Sergeant O managed the second-floor incursion. Your perimeter team is holding the ground level." "I know," he said. "I got a full report on the way in." He did not move away from her. He was still crouching, at her eye level, closer than they had been physically in weeks. "Choi has been taken into custody. Shin's go signal never came. We intercepted the authorization chain in the last 6 minutes. His people on the street stood down when the Shin directive was withdrawn. So it's over," she said. "For tonight," he said. "The next 24 hours will close the rest of it." She looked at him, at the specific geography of his face at close range, the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the set of his jaw, the particular quality of attention he was giving her that she had learned over 3 years to distinguish from every other kind of attention he gave to every other thing in his world. "Help me up," she said. He stood and extended his hand, and she took it, and he pulled her to her feet, and for a moment they were standing very close together in the third-floor room of the Itaewon property, with the rain against the windows, and the sound of his people managing the ground level below, and neither of them said anything. She dropped his hand. "I need to finish the arbitration filing," she said. He stepped back. "I'll have someone drive you to a hotel when it's clear. I'll manage my own arrangements," she said. "Amara." She looked at him. He looked back. The compressed control of the last several hours had thinned enough that she could see through it to the person who had been awake for going on 3 nights and who had just driven 12 minutes at speed to a building where the woman he had failed systematically over the course of 3 years was sitting against a wall on the floor because someone had decided she was a usable piece in a game that was his. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not for tonight. For all of it. I know that's not—" He stopped. Started again. "I know what I'm sorry means at this point. I know it's not a mechanism. I know it doesn't do anything structural." He breathed out. "I just needed you to hear me say it without any other agenda attached to it. Nothing I'm trying to get from it. Just, I'm sorry." She stood with it for a moment. "I heard you," she said. Then she picked up the laptop and sat back down at the desk and opened the arbitration file, and he stood in the room for a moment longer before he went back downstairs to manage the rest of the night. She filed the arbitration documentation at 2:46 in the morning. It was complete, correct, and the strongest version of the argument she'd been building for 8 weeks. She sent it and closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of the third floor and let herself, for the first time since 6:47 that morning, feel the full weight of the day. Not wallow in it. She didn't have the disposition for wallowing. Just feel it. The morning call. The packing. The cipher. The floor. Chae-Hyun's face crouching at her eye level in the rain-lit dark. She went to one of the sleeping rooms and lay down and was unconscious in 4 minutes. She slept without dreaming. She left the Itaewon property at 8 the next morning. Chae-Hyun was not there. He had been and gone, Sergeant O told her, sometime around 5. She did not ask where. She called a car and went back to the Mappo apartment and showered and changed and made coffee and stood at her kitchen window and watched the street below and thought about what came next. What came next was Ji Yeon-soo's office, where Amara sat across from her attorney 2 days later and said, clearly and without preamble, that she wanted to discuss an alteration to the dissolution proceedings. Ji looked at her. "What kind of alteration?" "I want to extend the processing period," Amara said, "by 60 days. Ji was quiet for a moment. "That's your right. Can I ask why?" "Because I'm not finished deciding something," Amara said, "and I don't intend to finalize a legal process while I'm still in the middle of a decision." Ji nodded slowly. "And if at the end of 60 days the decision is the same, then we proceed," Amara said. "Nothing changes legally. I'm not withdrawing. I'm pausing." "Okay," Ji said. "I'll file the extension request." Amara walked out of Jai's office into a cold December morning and stood on the pavement and breathed the air that smelled like the city and rain and the particular smell of a Seoul winter, which was something she had come to know the way you come to know things you live inside long enough, and she did not know what the 60 days would produce, and she had decided she was going to be honest about not knowing instead of resolving it before it was ready to be resolved. She called Soren Han. They met at the same cafe in Hongdae. Soren was already there again, same coat, different expression, less careful, less braced. Whatever she had been carrying when she'd made the decision to tell Amara about Jae-hyun's visit, she seemed to have set some of it down. "How are you?" Soren said. "Functional," Amara said, "which seems to be my operating standard." "It's not a bad one." Amara ordered coffee, looked at the table for a moment. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you told me. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with it, but you gave me information I needed, at personal cost to yourself, without asking anything in return. That deserves to be acknowledged." Soren looked at her hands around her cup. "I'm not sure it was entirely selfless." "What do you mean?" "I spent 10 years," Soren said, "being a woman who didn't have the full picture and made decisions inside incomplete information because the people around me decided what I needed to know." She paused. "I didn't want to be one of those people to someone else." Amara looked at her. "And Jae-hyun, when he came to see you, the post-mortem, as you called it, how did that end?" Soren considered. "With him understanding something he'd been refusing to understand for approximately 15 years, which doesn't make him a changed man, but it does make him a man who is no longer hiding from the specific question." She looked up. "What you do with that is entirely yours." "I know," Amara said. "I know it is." They drank their coffee. Outside, the December street moved past in the particular rhythm of a city that doesn't stop for any individual decision being made inside any of its cafes, and Amara sat in that and found it, unexpectedly, a comfort. The city did not require her to resolve this today. The city was indifferent in the most useful way. "Are you staying in Seoul?" Soren asked. "For now," Amara said. "I'm building something here. It would be a strange time to leave." Soren nodded. "The legal firm." "The beginning of one," Amara said. "I have 2 clients, one shared office space, and an international arbitration win that I filed at 2:46 in the morning from a building with a security perimeter." She paused. "It's a start." Soren looked at her for a moment, and then she did something Amara hadn't seen her do before. She laughed, not politely, not carefully, but a real laugh, brief and surprised. "Yes," Soren said, "that is a start." The 60 days moved in the way that time moves when you are doing the actual work of living. Not quickly, not slowly, but with the specific texture of days that are genuinely full. Amara set up the shared office in Mapo. She took on 3 more clients. She hired a junior associate named Park Sun-young, who was 27 and extraordinarily sharp, and reminded Amara of herself at that age, in ways that were sometimes uncomfortable and mostly productive. She had dinners with Ji and with 2 colleagues from the Singapore arbitration who came through Seoul in January. She called her father every Sunday. She ran along the Han River on mornings when the cold was manageable, and sometimes on mornings when it wasn't, because she had found that physical discomfort in controlled doses was useful for keeping the rest of her thinking clear. She did not see Jae-hyun. He did not contact her, which she had not asked for but noted. He was allowing the 60 days to be what she had asked them to be. Space in which she was not being managed or influenced or pressured by anything external. She didn't know whether this was discipline or respect or something he was doing at significant personal cost. She didn't ask. She let it be what it was and focused on what was hers to focus on. Choi Min-jun was handled within the Kang organization's internal processes. She didn't know the specifics and didn't want to. The Shin Group's move against the Eastern Network was contained within the 12-hour window Jae-hyun had been working toward. She knew this because it eventually became a piece of information in the general ecosystem of Seoul's business landscape, not because anyone told her directly. The 3 organizations that had been circling the Ghost King's perceived vulnerability discovered, in the weeks after the Itaewon night, that the perceived vulnerability had closed, and that the Ghost King was not, in fact, weakened by personal disruption the way they had calculated. He was, if anything, something harder than he had been before. She filed that away without deciding what to do with it. On the 58th day of the 60, she went to the Han River in the early morning and ran longer than usual, out past her normal turning point, along the path where the city opened up on both sides, and you could see the bridge lights reflected in the water, moving and still at the same time. She ran until her lungs were working hard enough that thinking became secondary, and then she stopped at a point where no one else was around and put her hands on her knees and breathed through the exertion and let her mind do what it had been building toward for 2 months. She thought about what she wanted, not what she should want, not what made the most sense given the circumstances, or what protected the most people, or what resolved the situation most cleanly. What she actually wanted in the unmanaged space behind all the clarity and competence and functional. She wanted to build the firm that was real and clean and entirely hers. The two-room office in Mapo, Park Sun-young, and her extraordinary sharpness, the Singapore win, the beginning of something that was being made from her own work and no one else's arrangement. She wanted her father's firm to be stable and unentangled from anyone else's legal architecture. That was also real and was going to require sustained attention. She wanted, she found, to not spend the rest of her life wondering what it would have been if she'd had the honest conversation at the right time, instead of protecting both of them from it for 3 years. That last one was the complicated one. That was the one she had been building toward for 2 months of 60-day mornings. She straightened up. She breathed the cold January air. She watched the water. Then she took out her phone and wrote a single message. "When you have time, I'd like to talk, not about the legal process, about the other thing. Hey." She sent it and put the phone in her pocket and ran back the way she'd come. He responded in 9 minutes. "Tonight. The restaurant in Jongno, if that's all right with you." She thought about the restaurant in Jongno, the private room, the cold tea he hadn't touched, the folder of notes she'd had with her, the version of herself who had sat across from him and said, "The legal process will proceed regardless." It would still proceed. That was not what tonight was about. "Tonight," she wrote back. 7. The restaurant was the same, the private room was the same. She arrived first again, because she still preferred the room before the dynamic shifted, and she sat without her folder of notes, and without her legal brain fully engaged, and waited. He arrived 6 minutes late this time. She noted the departure from his normal punctuality and said nothing about it. He sat down across from her. He looked like someone who had slept in the past several days, which was an improvement, and he looked like someone who had been considering what tonight was for and was not entirely certain how to begin it. "You said the other thing," he said. "Yes," she said. "I want to make sure I understand what that means," he said, "before I say anything that's predicated on a wrong understanding." She looked at him. "It means I've spent 60 days deciding whether there is a version of what we were that could become something different, under different conditions. And I don't have a clean answer to that, which is the most honest thing I can tell you." "Okay," he said. "I'm not coming back to the penthouse," she said. "I know. I'm not adjusting anything about the firm I'm building or the life I've been building in the past 2 months. Any version of what happens from this point is built on that foundation being mine, entirely and without negotiation. I would not ask for it to be otherwise," he said. "Not quickly. Not the reflexive agreement of someone who will say what the situation requires." He said it with the flat certainty he brought to things he had actually decided. "I spent 3 years treating your life as something that could be organized around mine without asking you. I'm aware of what that cost. I'm not going to replicate the architecture." She looked at the table. "And what are you offering, from where you're standing now after the past 3 months? What do you actually have to offer that's different?" He was quiet for a moment. It was not the silence of avoidance. She knew his avoidant silence, the one where he looked at a far wall and waited for a moment to pass. This was something else. The silence of someone assembling an honest answer from parts that don't come easy. "I don't know how to be in a relationship," he said. "I knew that before. What I didn't know, what I spent 3 years not examining, was that I was using that as a permission structure, to take what was comfortable without giving anything that cost me." His hands were on the table. Not still this time. He pressed his fingers down against the tablecloth in the particular way of someone holding themselves in place. "I went to see Soren after you left." "I know," Amara said. "She told me." A brief flicker across his face. Not surprise, but a recalibration. "What did she tell you?" "That you spent 2 hours asking questions about your own behavior," Amara said. "That it was uncomfortable to watch." "It was uncomfortable to do," he said. "I want to be clear that the discomfort is not something I'm presenting as evidence of growth. Discomfort doesn't mean anything on its own." He paused. What it produced, though, the understanding of what I was doing and why, that's something I'm still working with. Not in a way that has a clean resolution, just in a way that means I can no longer pretend I don't understand the pattern. She looked at him. At the specific quality of this. Not a man performing contrition, not a man deploying an apology as a tool toward a desired outcome. A man saying something uncomfortable in front of someone he had lost because he understood that saying it was right, regardless of what it produced. She had waited 3 years to see him be that unprotected in front of her. She was not going to tell him that, not tonight. I want to be clear about something, she said. What happened between us for 3 years is not going to become a different story because we're both sitting here having an honest conversation. It is what it was. I cried in hotel bathrooms I didn't need to be in. I smiled through dinners that cost me more than you knew they cost me. I loved you in a way that I had no right to and that you didn't ask for, and that I managed entirely alone, and that is going to be a part of the landscape of anything that comes after, not a thing we skip past because we're starting fresh. I don't want to skip past it, he said. Good, she said, because I'm not capable of that. I know, he said. I don't want a version of you that is. She breathed. Then here's what I'm proposing. Not a reconciliation, not a return to what was, something that hasn't existed yet, that would have to be built from the ground, on honest terms, with the full understanding that I will leave immediately, and without drama, the moment it becomes something that is costing me myself again. She looked at him steadily. I am not a woman who waits anymore. That ended in a specific elevator on a specific night, and it is not coming back. I understand, he said. Do you? She said. Because understanding it conceptually and encountering it in practice are different things, and you have a specific history of responding to the practice by going quiet. The directness of it landed on him. She watched it land, a slight tightening around the eyes, a breath that adjusted itself. Not defensiveness, something more like recognition. You're right, he said, and I'm going to fail at it probably, not intentionally. But I have spent 41 years not knowing how to be present with someone in a way that costs me something, and knowing that I need to do it differently is not the same as doing it differently. He paused. What I can offer is that when I fail at it, I will not hide from it. I will not make you do the work of surfacing it alone. I will... He stopped. I will try to be the person who shows up to the difficult conversation instead of going quiet and waiting for the moment to pass. Amara looked at him for a long time. That's the most I've ever heard you say about your own interior, she said. Yes, he said. It's a start, she said. She picked up her tea. She drank it. She set it down. I'm keeping the Mapo apartment, she said. I need my own space. That's not negotiable. Okay, he said. And I want Sunday mornings to be mine. No organization business, no family obligations, no calls that pull you somewhere else. If we are spending Sunday mornings together, they are entirely ours. Okay, he said again, with the specific steadiness of someone agreeing to things they intend to keep. And Madame Kang, Amara said. Something shifted in his face. She will not speak to me the way she spoke to me at that dinner, Amara said. Not in private, not in public, not with 12 people and 2 household staff as an audience. If she does it again, I will not wait for you to respond. I will respond myself, which will not be comfortable for anyone in the room. She held his gaze, and you will not be silent. A silence, not avoidance, processing. No, he said, I won't. I need to hear you say that clearly. My mother made a choice at that dinner that was hers to make, he said, and his voice was even, but there was something solid under it, something that hadn't been there at the dinner table in the Kang estate. I failed to respond to it. I will not fail to respond again. Not to her, not to anyone, not at any table. He looked at her. That is something I can say to you without qualification. She looked at him. She thought about the moment she had counted heartbeats at that dinner table, the 40 minutes she had waited before excusing herself, the hotel bathroom afterward, not the Kang Hotel, a different one, a bathroom in a small place in Insadong where she had gone alone because she needed somewhere that wasn't his. She had sat on the cold tile floor of that bathroom and pressed her back against the tub and let herself feel all of it for exactly 7 minutes, and then she had washed her face and gone back to the city. She was not going to that bathroom again. All right, she said. He looked at her. All right. We'll see how it goes, she said. That's all I'm saying tonight. We'll see how it goes. That's enough, he said. They ate dinner, real dinner this time. She was hungry in a way she hadn't been at the meeting about the dissolution papers. And she ordered something substantial and ate most of it. And he ordered without looking at the menu because he always knew exactly what he wanted in restaurants, which had been a small, reliable irritant for 3 years and was apparently still one. She told him that. He looked at her over his glass with the particular expression she had learned to identify as him being surprised into something close to amusement. You find that irritating, he said. Every single time, she said. I'll learn the menu, he said. You won't, she said. I'll try, he said. They finished dinner. The private room had gotten warm from the conversation and the food and the particular effort of two people being honest with each other in a way they had spent 3 years avoiding. She felt it. A loosening in her chest that was not resolution, was not the clean ending of anything, but was the specific quality of a door that has been closed for a long time, opening on its hinges with the actual weight of an actual door. Not swinging, not dramatic, just opening. She pulled on her coat. He stood when she did. He walked her out through the restaurant to the entrance, and outside the cold hit them both, and the city was running in every direction, and the December street was loud in the particular way of Seoul at 8 at night. She pulled out her phone to call a car. Amara, he said. She looked at him. He was standing in front of the restaurant with the cold air moving around them and the city behind him, and the specific look of a man who has something to say and is deciding, in real time, whether to say it or manage it. He said it. I saw you, he said. I want you to know that I saw you. All of it. The dinners and the reading light and the way you learned to move in a world that wasn't designed for you and never asked you if it should be. His jaw was tight. Not against emotion exactly, against the difficulty of words that weren't his natural language. I saw you, and I didn't say so, and that is the thing I most regret. Not the contract, not the arrangement, not the specific failures at specific dinners. The years of you being there and being seen and hearing nothing back from me. She stood in the cold and let it land. She had wanted to hear something like this for 3 years. She had stopped wanting it, or told herself she had. She was not sure anymore whether she'd stopped wanting it or had simply stopped expecting it, and whether those were the same thing. I know, she said. I know you know, he said. I just needed you to hear me say it. The echo of her own words from the Itaewon property came back to her. I just needed you to hear me say it without any other agenda attached to it. She noted it. Neither of them pointed it out. She looked at him standing in the Seoul winter and thought about the 42nd floor conference room and the meeting that ran 2 hours longer than it should have, and the call from a Seoul number she hadn't recognized. She thought about all the distances a person travels between one decision and the next. Good night, Jae-hyun, she said. Good night, he said. The car came and she got in, the door closed, and the city moved past the windows the way it always did. Running, lit, indifferent, absolutely full of people in the middle of their own particular distances. She watched it and did not try to name what she was feeling, because some things are not ready to be named yet, and forcing a name on them before they're ready makes them smaller than they are. She got home to the Mapo apartment. She hung up her coat. She made tea. She stood at the kitchen window with the cup warm in her hands and looked at the street below and the apartment building across the way and the particular pattern of lit and dark windows that was someone else's evening, someone else's decisions, someone else's distance from wherever they started. She had come to Seoul as a solution to a problem. She had become something else here, something she was still in the process of becoming, which was not a comfortable place to be, but was the only honest one. Her phone was on the counter. She looked at it. She did not pick it up. She drank her tea and let the quiet of the apartment be quiet. In the morning, she would go to the Mapo office. Park Sun-young would be there early. She was always early, another uncomfortable mirror. And they had a client call at 9 and a contract review at 11. She had built the beginning of something, and the beginning needed her attention. In the morning, she would run. In the morning, there would be the specific texture of days that are genuinely full, that belong to no one's arrangement but her own, that start at the time she decides and end when she decides, and carry only the weight she chooses to carry. That was not nothing. That was not the thing she had planned when a Seoul number called her in Lagos. It was not the thing she had tried to protect when she drove in silence for 40 minutes and packed a bag in the dark and wrote 15 words she'd miscounted as 7. It was not the thing the girl who had practiced her handwriting understood she was becoming, but it was real. It was hers. She finished her tea. She washed the cup and set it on the rack and dried her hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven door. A dish towel she had bought herself at a market in Mapo on a Saturday morning when she had no obligations to anyone and the whole city was available to her in whatever direction she wanted to walk. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to bed. Outside the window, Seoul ran on through the night, the way cities do, without pause, without sentiment, without any particular care for the individual decisions being made inside its apartments and restaurants and buildings and cars. The Han River moved the way it always moved, dark and steady, carrying whatever was put in it forward and forward and forward until the landscape changed and it became something new. She slept without setting an alarm because in the morning she would wake when she was ready, and whatever came next would find her already standing.